Of this actor. Hi, I'm Carrie Millar with Dentist Insurance Services, and this is cyber insurance. It's not expensive, it's priceless. So, who am I? I am Carrie Millar. I have a degree in risk management insurance from FSU and a master's, my MBA, and I've been in the insurance business for 21 years, all of them in dentistry. And I am with Dentist Insurance Services, which is a national insurance agency that specializes in dental offices from individual providers all the way up to six, seven, 800 locations. So we have clients in all of the different spaces, mobile teledentistry, implants, you name it, we've done it and we've come across it. And cyber has been a huge growing threat to the dental practices, especially in the last, I would say 12 to 13 years. It started out as just a small threat and it has increased drastically. And so as that has increased, we have increased our ability to get different coverages. We have worked with several carriers to get better policies in force, especially when we see the different types of claims that we see on an almost weekly basis now. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to go over the cyber liability insurance, just what attacks we're seeing, what threats are out there, the amount of coverage you should have, the types of coverage you should have, and average cost. This is not a sales pitch. You do not have to use us. We just want to make sure you understand what we're seeing out there and what kind of threats practices are having. But please feel free to put any type of questions in the chat as I go. And if I don't cover them while I'm going, I will answer them. But this is meant to be just very informative. So we like to say that when it comes to the potential for cyber, it's actually a three-pronged approach. So you need to have a really great strong IT security company. We do not negate this. Cyber insurance does not replace your IT provider. We think IT is wonderful. If your IT provider is telling you that you don't need a cyber insurance policy because you have them, that's just really not the correct answer. They are one part of a three-pronged approach, and strong IT is there. However, there are always new things that we're seeing. There are phone scams. There's so many different threats out there that no IT provider can guarantee that you're never going to have an event. And if you have an event, there are a lot of things as a dental practice you have to do in order to be HIPAA compliant, and the type of notifications and responses you have to have. And your IT company is not going to pay for that on your behalf. You're going to be stuck with those on the back end. So a strong IT is very, very important. Making sure that you are HIPAA compliant is very important. Making sure that you don't just have a notebook that's on the shelves, but that your employees are HIPAA compliant at the individual practice level, that you're doing the work yearly, and that we're just making sure that that's there. So that's the second leg. And then the third leg after the prevention and the HIPAA is to have a very comprehensive cyber liability policy in place prior to having an event. And a lot of people say, oh, I have a cyber policy, it's on my office policy. And that's great if it actually has really good coverage. A lot of times it's just an add-on and it doesn't actually pay out, or it's really just a data breach coverage. And so we're just going to go over what we're seeing, what you need to have on your policies, and then what that costs. So what we're seeing as far as a threat landscape is that it used to be that a majority of the claims coming in were for ransomware. So somehow hackers got into your system, they shut it down, and then they made a demand for money. And this started being, $5,000, $10,000 is what we were seeing when this happened in the 2012s, 2013s, 2014s. We were seeing some dental offices being targeted, but it wasn't huge amounts. We probably had a claim every quarter, and the amount that they were asking for was, like I said, $5,000, $10,000. Fast forward to, even 2023, 2024, we're seeing much, much more increase in the frequency of claims. I would say at this point, we are almost averaging about one a week. So we are seeing dental practices get hit much more frequently. When we see the ransom, it is drastically higher as far as the amount that they're asking for. It's almost always at least six figures as a starting point. If it's a multi-office location, it's sometime in the seven figures. So I mean, if the ransom is what they're asking for, those are much higher numbers. What we're also seeing a lot of is what they call business email compromise. This is something that is definitely growing and has been growing. What they do is they will come in through an email, well, whether it be somebody clicking on a link or somebody opening up an attachment, and they will sit in your system for several weeks. And they will sit there and they will watch and see what people do. And they will look and see what kind of information or how they can exploit you further. And so, what that often leads to is funds transfer fraud. So what they'll do is they'll either figure out where you're sending money to or who is sending you money. They will intercept that. They will either send a link to send the money elsewhere, or they will, sometimes they even do phone calls and they say, oh, we changed accounts, I'm sending you a new link, things like that. And so that funds transfer is where they're trying to get lump sums of money just sent to them. So that's a big one that we're seeing as the funds transfer. And then we're seeing all kinds of other new ones coming up and about. We've seen just drastically different things. And what we're seeing as far as the threat actors is that it's organized crime. The organized crime is often based in international companies, but do have employees in the United States that they pay through shell companies. These organizations have buildings, they have HR departments, they have employee benefits. Like it is a real business, and this is how they make their money. And it's just it's not a group of people in a dark hotel room hacking. It's very organized. And I heard it said the other day, it's kind of like the Jurassic Park, where it used to be the T-Rexes and you were waiting for these big events. But now with AI, it's more like the Velociraptors, and they're just constantly checking the fences to see where you have a defense down, and that's when they attack. And the use of AI in this is really going to magnify the frequency of this. And so you just have to make sure that you are ready for this and are have planned beforehand, have your three prongs, and that's the best that you can do to plan for this. So why dental? Why dentists, right? We have that question a lot. Why medical? The biggest thing is that most smaller practices, and when I say small business practices, we're talking about any businesses less than 25, 50 million in income. We're considering that small business. I know that we are drastically different as far as, that's a $1.5 million practice to, a 10, 20 location practice. But what that we call small and medium businesses just don't have the money to have a full-time IT security person on staff. And they don't always have the money to upgrade every system to be on the top of everything. So the budgetary constraints of this business is what makes it very prevalent to get into, as well as we don't always have all the latest softwares. If we all got integrated every single AI and every single new thing that's out there, it would be ridiculous. So a lot of us have old EHR systems. Some of us still are still doing not cloud-based, but server-based systems, and that's fine, cloud-based, server-based. But it's just one of the main reasons why this industry is targeted. But the real reason is the patient health information. So instead of just getting credit card information, they get people's home address, social securities, their insurance information, and from there they can set up fake loans. They try and take over people's deeds. They can buy houses. They can file fake insurance claims. And so that information on the dark web is worth a lot more than if they were to just hack into a store and get some credit card numbers. That doesn't mean that they're not also after the credit card numbers. It just means that the data that we have and what they can resell is much more valuable to them. So I want to talk about a few of the claims that we are seeing and how this has worked. So we had a situation where a patient called the front office of a dental practice, and this patient asked the reception to check their email because he was a patient on file and he wanted to make sure she could open them. And so he had sent over the patient files, his admittance form. It was basically the general questionnaire that you asked. She went ahead and clicked on it and she's like, oh, this didn't open. He's like, oh, okay, I'll have to call you back. But that was it. They were hacked. They were in. 3 weeks later, they came in after a long holiday weekend. This one happened to be Martin Luther King weekend. And all of their systems were shut down, and there was a ransom request for $500,000. And it was texted to the dentist. It also was texted to several members of the staff because in their computers, they had all the employees' information as well. So initially, they said, we want this money. The dentist didn't really respond. They didn't have a formal plan in place of what would happen. So when the hackers didn't hear anything, they started calling the dentist, but they also started calling some of the employees saying, hey, I have your data. You need to tell your boss to call me. And they were kind of harassing them. So it took about 2 weeks for them to get these hackers out of their system to pay the ransom. They ended up having to pay a portion of the ransom. They got it down. And then they had to do a forensic investigation. So we have 2 weeks of lost income, which is very important to a dental practice because we have a time element in dentistry. So yes, you can make up that 2 weeks worth of patients, but that's 2 weeks of new patients that you're not going to be able to see. So because there's a time element, you are out that money. You have the cost of the forensic investigation. Depending on the size of your practice, that can be very expensive or not as expensive. On average, it's about $25,000 per practice. That's assuming you have four to six ops. Obviously, larger group practices are going to have a much higher forensic investigation cost. The forensic investigation is required under HIPAA, and we'll talk about that later. So you can't just unplug the computer, wipe everything down, and get back on and expect that the hacker's just going to go away. You have to follow the procedures laid out. On top of that, if any of your patient files were breached under HIPAA, you have to do breach notification to all of those patients. You want to do that anyways for PR reasons. And you need to offer the free credit reporting, the monitoring, all of that stuff, which costs a lot of money. You may probably have to replace computers and software. I would tell you probably in like 2020, 2019, you could keep all the same softwares. You could probably go back to your backups, but they're really getting very smart now. And because they're sitting there in your computer for several weeks, they know when you back up, they know what the systems are. Sometimes they even can figure out passwords. So a lot of times you have to start extremely fresh, and that's going to cost, all the computers, all the software reboots, things like that. We have the ransom amount. The ransom amount you can negotiate down, but if they give you that the decryption key to get your stuff back and use, which is not a small process, right? They don't give you the key and then you're like, oh, yay, 20 minutes later, I have access to my data. It takes a while for it to become unencrypted. It takes several days for it to get back up. That doesn't mean that halfway through it, they're not going to be like, oh, no, wait, we want 100,000 more, or we want 50,000 more, because you are at their mercy, basically. And then we have the PR expenses. So this one office that was attacked ended up having over $500,000, just under $500,000 in expenses. And that does not include any third-party lawsuits. So that's when any of those patients that you had compromised decides to sue you because their patient health information was compromised. And so we are starting to see class action lawsuits on that, which is very, very scary. Another type of claim we're seeing is we had a dentist who came in on a Monday morning, and their answering machine was just full of like really angry clients asking why they were getting invoices. And it turned out that the hackers had come into their system through the business email. They had sat there, they had seen what their management system sent out as far as what it looks like when they send an invoice out to clients. And they basically spoofed that invoice and then mass emailed it from the dentist domain to 1,000 clients. And over 50 of those clients just paid that amount. They thought it was a bill. They had been there recently. They figured it was just something they needed to do. So they had about $12,000 in payments that their clients had thought they sent them, but had sent the bad actor. So that was a big wake up call. Now, in those situations, the costs are not as expensive, but you still need to do the forensic investigation costs. That most likely will then determine whether you need to do the breach notification. So the forensic team, whether it's the incident response team from the insurance carrier, or if you don't have insurance and you're using an outside firm or you're using your IT firm, they should be able to go in and determine how far the bad actors were able to penetrate. And they should be able to let you know if they were not able to get to your patient information, because you should have it encrypted. It should be either cloud-based or server-based, but they shouldn't be able to get into it. So if they're not able to penetrate that wall, then they should be able to write you a letter stating that your patient information was not breached, which means that you would not have to report that event to HIPAA. You would not have to report that event to the Department of Health, and you would not have to face any of those penalties. You just have to make sure you do that in forensic investigation in order to determine that either way. You do need to have, PR expenses, because now you have several clients who have gotten this email. You want to make sure you have professionals that let them know, hey, this is a fake email. This is what happened. You want to make sure that you're handling that correctly. You definitely want to handle the 50 people who paid correctly. You're going to want to reimburse them for that money. That's where the funds transfer fraud comes into play. So in that situation, it was about a $50,000 loss. But again, you also have now opened yourself up to potential lawsuits. Now, in this situation, their patient health information isn't compromised, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to sue you, and you're not going to have to defend that and figure out, that it really wasn't compromised. The other thing that we're seeing lately, which is just really sad, but it is what it is any situations where there are patient files that are breached and there's more than 500 records, not patients, records that are affected, you have to report that to the Department of Health. And they have this really great wall on their public facing page, which we call the wall of shame, but it's the breach report. And anybody is allowed to go in there and look and see who has been breached, how many individuals were affected, what the incident was. And this has been a huge list for law firms to use in order to try and set up class action lawsuits. So there was a dental center that was hit with that actually just settled, but had an event in 2023 with multiple millions of patients that were affected. They just settled a few months ago for $2.7 million. That's on top of what it cost them to either pay the ransom to get those people out in this hacking incident. It also costs for the breach response, the cost for the PR, the cost for the forensic investigation. So on top of all of that, which is the first party cost that we'll talk about, the second party cost was that fund lawsuit. Also, I would be very sad to not at least point out that if you are in a smaller town and it is a slow news cycle, that HIPAA wall is also a great place for people to pick up small news stories, even if it's you see the local news anchor is your patient and they get that patient notification that their information is breached. We've seen that is what triggered it. And then now you have a news cycle where local dentist gets hacked, and that's not what you want to have in the news cycle. Excuse me for a second. I got a runny nose. So what should your policy include? So like we said, not all cyber policies are the same. They are not all made the same. You want to make sure that there's key coverages in them. If you have them added onto your office policy, most likely not all of these coverages are going to be on there. If you're buying a policy from your IT company or a HIPAA company and it's an add-on, you most likely don't have that in there, especially if it's only a couple $100. That is too good to be true. I will tell you, I've had some people come to me and say, oh, I have a cyber policy with my IT. And I'm like, oh, okay, send me a copy of it. And they're like, oh, no, I don't even have a deck page. I'm part of their group. That is not a comprehensive policy. It's not going to have coverage. It's not going to pay. So we're going to go over these one by one. The first thing you want to have is business income. Your exact direct first party business income is what I'm talking about. So it's going to pay for the lost income while you are down. Most tax take about 5 to 7 business days to get back up and running. I've seen them take as long as 3 weeks, depending on what they attacked, how long they were in there, how if you had to pay the ransom, how long it took for them to do the encryption. If you don't pay the ransom and you were able to get them out, how long it takes your IT to get them out to get you back restored. So on average, 5 to 7 business days. And those are again vital times. It's a time element. The second part of business income that is nice to have but not a must is a contingent business income. So if you rely on a different website or a different company to do business with, and that prohibits you from doing business, that's what we're talking about. So if you are using a patient health information system and like Open Dental or Dentrix or any of those things, and they have a breach and they are shut down and you can't get into that cloud system, that is one of the situations. We had a few claims for business income from the Change Healthcare loss. So you couldn't get your money. They weren't paying. You weren't able to file your claims with the dental carriers, or that kind of stuff. Those are other reasons why you would want that contingent business income. It's not a drastic need, but it is a nice thing to have if it comes with it. But the business income for the first party response is very important. The second thing you want to have is the cyber ransom. We've seen this called cyber extortion. I've seen it called a few other things. But basically, it is the money that will pay the hackers to get your information back, should it come to that. So every business has a different philosophy. Every IT company has a different philosophy. Most of them will want to try and get them out without paying them or rewarding the hackers, but it becomes a vital business decision, right? Do I pay them and get my data back so I don't have to worry about potential, stoppage of business, potentially them leaking this information on the dark web to my patients, things like that. So you kind of have to decide. Some insurance companies will do an indemnity coverage where you have to pay the hacker, you have to negotiate, and then they'll pay you back. So you have to try and get a receipt from the hackers, which is just insane to me. Others will do the negotiating on your behalf and will be the ones that negotiate with the hackers. That makes it go so much smoother. A lot of times, those companies are the ones that understand how this works. They've dealt with a lot of these people before. A lot of times they'll use tactics to start the negotiations and stall them while the incident response on the back end is trying to get them out. But you don't have to try and find out how to get Bitcoin, because if a cyber ransom is negotiated, they pay it on your behalf. So that's just a nice extra perk you can look for. You want to make sure they have the funds transfer coverage. That's the amount of money that sometimes they call it social engineering. It's when you voluntarily or your clients give money to the bad actors. Your system was not necessarily hacked. Sometimes they can get you to transfer money. Sometimes they send an invoice that looks like an invoice. We had a situation where a multi-group practice was buying an individual practice. The law firm sent them the link to make the wire transfer. It was intercepted and sent somewhere else, and that wire transfer for that $3 million was actually sent to bad actors. And I mean, it was crazy. So those are the kind of things that are available. You want to make sure that it 100% covers the cost of the patient notification, the breach response, which is required under HIPAA to notify all patients. You want to have them the incident response, which is the forensic investigation. You want that covered. And then another really important part, which is normally not covered in those policies that are either the IT ones or the ones that come with your office insurance, is that there is third-party liability costs. And that is for when patients sue the practice because their patient health information was compromised, or if you posted pictures online, or you commented on a Yelp review and basically acknowledged that they were your patients, which you're not supposed to do under HIPAA, or there was some type of identifying marks, and for media liability, they sue you for that. Any type of that type of liability, that is then included in this. So you have the first party coverage, which makes the practices whole, and then you have the liability, which protects you from outside lawsuits. So in order to get a cyber insurance policy, every carrier is a little bit different, but it's not a situation where you can just sign a dotted line and they just let you have it. There's several IT systems, and requirements that need to be in place in order for them to allow you to have coverage. So they want to have the multi-factor authentication. So your MFA needs to be on your email. It needs to be on your VPN. And yes, you should have a VPN. It needs to be on your network, and it needs to be on your dental software. And if you are allowing people to remote access into your system, it needs to be on the remote access. And you need to have a formal weekly backup process. I know most people back up daily. That's great, but you have to at least have a formal system in place for weekly. You need to have a formal patching process for a system update. So it can't just be that, like, oh, every once in a while I check for updates. You need to have a designated person who's in charge of making sure that they look for the updates on a weekly basis and that there's a patching process in place. A lot of people will do that on a specific day of the week, like, okay, Thursdays is the day that everybody keeps their computers on, or if your IT says it should all be shut down, then that's the day that they go through and do it. So that way you know it's been done. You need to have cybersecurity training for your employees. There are several great companies that will do this for you. Sunset, Dark Horse, Black Talon. There are several that are not just dental industry specific, but you need to have an annual cybersecurity training for your employees. You need to have your antivirus and firewalls up, and then you need to have encryption for your patient data at the endpoint and in transit. So if you are a general and you are sending patient health information to specialists, you need to make sure that those emails are encrypted, and you need to make sure that you are using a high level of encryption software to send that. You can't just email patient records to people. And then very importantly, you need to have a formal cyber incident response plan. So what happens if your office is attacked, right? If you come in on Monday morning, does your staff know what to do? Do they know where their cyber policy is? Do they know who they're going to call? Do they know what they do with the patients? Do we keep a printout of the day's calendar, the day before, just so we at least know who's coming in every night in case something happens, things like that. So you want to at least just sit down, write out the formal incident response, the cyber incident response. Here's what would happen, so people at least know that you have a plan. Similar to if you have a fire drill, or if you have, any type of other situations, especially like for natural disasters, you should have a plan in place. Okay, the cost. I get asked this all the time. How much does it cost, and how much should I have? And so I will tell you that the minimum limits that you want is 2 times your monthly revenues. So that is the minimum amount that you want. So if you are an office that makes, $1 million, $1.5 million, you're going to want at least $500,000 in coverage right around there. If you are a larger DSO or a group practice that makes 10, 30, 20 million a week, you want to have those higher limits. The premiums are going to be based on three different things. It's going to be based on the number of patient files. So they're going to ask you how many patient records you have. That is total patient records that you have stored, not active patients. So if they are able to get into your electronic health record database, how many people are they going to be able to get at? And that's the number that you want to look at. The second one is your revenues. So they're going to want to know loosely how much you make on a monthly basis or annually, because that's the likelihood of how much business income they're going to have to pay out when you're down. And then the third cost is what your risk profile looks like online. So what they're going to do is they are going to scan the Ethernet and the darknet and all those fun things, and they're going to look and see, has your domain had breaches? Is there openings? Is there ways to get in without multi-factor authentication? So very much like that Velociraptor, they are going to poke and see if there are any vulnerabilities that they could see out there that would be easy for a hacker to get into very quickly. So those are the types of things they're going to look at. Based on that profile, they're going to come back with a number as far as premium. On average, that is about $150 per month per practice. So if you have multiple practices, multiple locations, there is a little bit of price break for scalability for sure, but that's on average of what the cost is. So the key takeaways from this, and I think we're just over a half hour, so I'm very happy that I was able to get this done in a pretty good time, is one, you need to have a good policy and a person who owns that policy. So you want to make sure you have a cyber insurance policy in place. You want to have a great IT in place. You want to have HIPAA in place, and you want to have a person at your office that is responsible for making sure that that's in place and that it is continually updated every year. So it can be the CFO, it can be the office manager, it can be the one of the owners, but you need to have somebody that takes ownership, because you would be surprised on how even giant organizations will say, oh yeah, I'm sure we do that. And you're like, okay, who does that? And they're like, oh, our CFO. And our CFO is like, no, HR does that. And HR is like, no, we let the practices do that at the practice level. And the practices are like, no, the corporate does that for us now. And there's either no policies, or there's policies that conflict, or they're paying like 2-3 times what they need to pay and they have no coverage. So that happens all the time. So have somebody whose ownership it is to have that. 2, all 3 prongs are very vital. Have a great IT. It can either be in-house or outsourced. There are several companies that out there that specialize in IT for dental practices. Please make sure you have one that understands dental IT or medical IT. It can be a local person. They just have to understand what the HIPAA laws are. They cannot just unplug and wipe everything clean and start again. You want to make sure they understand what you have to be responsible for. And then 2, please make sure you have a formal HIPAA compliance in place, whether it's Abide or HIPAA compliance, or there's several other companies out there. I know DK Carr will come in and do it. Debbie Carr will come in if you needed references. So if you need me to recommend people, I'm happy to, but make sure you have a formal HIPAA compliance in place. The third takeaway is to make sure that you update your Windows 10 before October. My office is in the middle of doing that right now. We are expecting this to be a huge vulnerability. We're expecting to be a big event in the cybersecurity world when Windows 10 is no longer supported. You can read online several articles having to do with it. We have, again, your IT company or other IT companies can help you get that updated, but you definitely have to update from Windows 10. You want to start with all the computers that have patient health information access first and go from there. I know that, it can be your copy machine, it can be the coffee machine. I mean, everything is wireless and all that stuff. So just please make sure you update all of that. And then 4th, like we said earlier, please make sure you have a cyber event plan, and you need to review it with your staff. just once a year. It can be one piece of paper with this, and this is what happens. You put it on the bulletin board in the break rooms, but please make sure that people know what happens. If they come in a Monday morning and they go to turn on a computer and they won't open up, what do they do, right? So when you have a cyber insurance policy, what I always tell everybody is to print copies of it, put it in a drawer, then delete it from your computer, because it's one of the first things that the cyber attackers are going to look for is, do you have a cyber policy? And if so, what are your limits? So do not store that on your computer. And please do not store it on your computer that says cyber insurance policy. Put it in a drawer and then say, okay, if you come in and we're blacked out, you need to call this person, then we're going to call the insurance company, then we're going to call IT, however we want to do it. So you just need to make sure that you have that all in place. And so that is it for me and this webinar. This is my information if you want to get a hold of me further. And I'm also happy to take any questions in the chat, and actually have somebody in my office that's listening. So if you have any questions, Brock, I will happily answer those as well. It's a lot. It's scary.
Yes, it is.
All right. Well, seeing and hearing none. Do you have any?
No.
Okay. Well, then thank you for attending, and I will get this recording out to everybody as well. Thank you, guys. Bye.